No, how are you pronouncing it?
Frissell.
No, that's a common mispronunciation, but it's Frizzell.
Frissell. Okay,
Yeah,
Bob Frissell.
Frizzell. There you go. Yeah.
Okay, well, all right, we just went live. We're live now with Mr. Bob Frissell, author of Nothing in This Book is True, but It's Exactly How Things Are. I love this book, Bob. It was amazing. You packed a lot in here, a lot of knowledge in a little book.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you showed me a cover of the edition that you did, because just last June I've come out with this one. This is the 25th anniversary edition, and it really what it is a brand new book. And so the edition that you're holding up there is well, it's got the basic stuff in it, about the Earth history and the sacred geometry. The whole point is to show the unity of life, that really what we are is, and what the universe is holographic. And what I mean by holographic is that everything and every part of the universe, including you and me, are a smaller version of the whole. We know if you take a hologram, you can cut it into, say, four equal pieces, or you can cut it into 1,000 pieces if you want to. And you could shine a laser through any one of those pieces that you cut off, and you would get a smaller version of the whole. And so, really the bottom line in all of that is to, in no matter which edition of my book you're looking at, the bottom line really is to prepare us for the change that not only are coming, the changes that we're deeply involved in right now, that's going to lead to nothing less than the ascension of the planet, and including as many who are ready to go. Uh, um, Without jumping all over the place right now, I just will say that there is a window of opportunity where the possibility does exist, however remote, that everybody can ascend together, and most certainly that is the ideal option. But it's very difficult. I don't know if it's impossible, but I'd say it's virtually impossible to even speak of ascension or anything beyond five sense reality if you don't know who you are.
Right,
And
right.
and and so you don't know who you are if you don't know that you're a holographic version of the whole, smaller version of the whole. And I'd say that is kind of like bottom line point number one that I'm trying to get at in these books. Now, I know I've learned a lot in 25 years. And so in this version of the book, it really is a brand new book, like I said earlier, Scott. But uh, one of the tricks I've learned is that in reading, many different books, is that authors who have come out with multiple versions of what they have to say, so much of the new book just reiterates what they've already said in previous books, but they, maybe put a little different turn or a little different twist on it, like that. And then maybe as little as 10% or so is brand new material. Yet it's considered to be a new book, and good books for the most part. I mean, well-known authors do this. So what I did with the 25th anniversary edition of the book was, uh, a part of me is thinking, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. so so I realized that, this thing has, for many years now, been an underground classic, spiritual classic, and it's got a lot of really good points in it. So I wanted to keep what was good, just, remembering what many other authors have done, and rephrasing it a little bit, stuff like that. But then the new part has 10 completely new chapters. And so many of the chapters are virtually total rewrites of the original version that, without question, it is a new book. So if you haven't gotten a hold of this one yet, well, you're in for a real treat, especially considering that you like the original version. So this is the second interview that I've done in the past year. The book came out June 25th of 2019. And so it's been almost a year right now. And this will be the second interview I've done with a guy who is who is still into the old version. So this will be fun.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I didn't know there was a new version, so I'm gonna have
Oh,
to
now
check
you
that out.
know.
So, I actually found out about your book from like suggested reading list from 1994 put out by the band Tool.
Tool, yeah.
So, I'm sure, I guess you get that connection a lot, huh?
Oh, I have so many Tool fans who have read my books and who have come to my workshops. And back in 2003, I was invited to be a guest speaker at a convention for Tool fans. The band wasn't there, but it was just, a convention for Tool fans. And it was in August in Las Vegas. And 114 degrees outside and that sort of thing, but inside it was really, really great. So I spent the weekend hanging out with Tool fans and just recognizing clearly that we have so much in common. It was a great time. And yeah, um, so many Tool fans reading my books, coming to my workshops. I'm very, very grateful to the band Tool. That's one of the prime movers and shakers that put my book really, onto center stage. So thank you very much, Tool. And
Um,
it's still reaping dividends to this day.
Apparently, and I'm hoping that I can help push that a little bit too with this interview, this podcast.
Yeah, well, I think you can. So it's
So,
great to be here. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
thank you for doing this. I'm so amazed that you were willing to do this with me.
Well, Scott, I mean, when you get to talk about your favorite things and have fun doing it, I mean, come on. It's
Yeah,
I love you would too doing interviews with people who have read your book, love your book, and are asking you got to. I'm going to say no, I don't think so.
right. Well, you heard it here first, everybody. If you have a podcast, Mr. Frissell would love to be on it and talk to you about his book.
There you go.
So I wanted to ask you, what do you think it is about your book? I know you have other books too,
Yeah.
in this series. What do you think it is about your work that inspires creators such as Tool and myself?
Well, it's uh, uh, that's an interesting question. I just kind of have to mull that one over for a bit. What is it? I what's coming to me as a possible answer here or a possible response is how I was so, oh goodness sakes, just hooked when I first discovered spirituality, and it was totally by accident, by the way. Goodness sakes, I was a professional bowler at the time, and in the never-ending attempt to be the very, very best bowler that I could be, uh, I realized that if I wanted to compete on a steady basis with the world's best, I had better find out a way or figure out a way to be calm and cool and collected more so than I was in pressure situations. That was the biggest difference between me and the top professionals. And so I had a good friend at the time, and I was just talking to him casually, just explaining, telling him, this is the deal for me. And just kind of like wondering out loud, what do I do here? And he had never, ever mentioned anything in spiritual terms to me before, but he says, you know what? There's a book that you got to read. It was a book by an author by the name of Alan Watts, and the name of the book was literally The Book, the subtitle being On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. And so I said, okay. And I went out and I got that book. And the moment I first opened it up, I was totally hooked. I was totally captivated. And I had no idea what this book was about, spirituality or, on the taboo against knowing who you are. But in taking a good look at it, I was not only addicted to the book, it followed me everywhere. I wouldn't don't leave home without it was my motto. and uh, and because something was awakening within me, deep down, beginning to resonate, that I intuitively knew it was always there, but it's something that I had learned through conditioning, becoming an adult and all that, to deeply bury it. So
Right,
it was reawakening. And that's the sense that I get. I mean, the feedback that I've had over 25 years is extraordinary. Goodness sakes, in the first edition's heyday, uh, it came out in August of 1994, and that was before I knew. I didn't even have a computer back then. I didn't have a website, certainly not even a computer, and so the mail I was getting was literally snail mail to the tune of at least 50 handwritten letters per week, all of them telling me, just thank you so much. They were just thrilled. And in the essence, the common message was this spiritual awakening was occurring within them. Something deep down was awakening, was resonating. Well, I understood exactly what they were talking about, because that's exactly what happened to me. And here's the other thing, Scott. From being a professional bowler, I had a total burning desire. I mean, 100% total commitment to be the very best that I could be. And I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to be stopped by the stuff that normally stops people. I was just going to use that to my advantage, find a way and to keep going. So I unwittingly had the entrance requirement. And that's this total burning desire. Gee, I thought everybody must have it, don't you? I find out later, of course, most people don't even know what the heck it is. For most people, it's, I'll try it if it doesn't get too bad. The moment a push comes to shove, I'm gone, buddy. Well, that's, the saying, when the going gets tough, the rest of that one.
right.
Yeah. So I had this, it's like, because I had this burning desire, I just kept going with my spiritual endeavors, and what began to happen was totally magic. Because I was totally committed, people started to crawl out of the woodwork. And maybe I would only be in their presence for as little as 5 minutes or so. Some became good friends, others in just a few moments. But whatever it was, they gave me what I needed in that moment to keep going further and further down the pathway. And that just kept going and going and going until it just kept getting better and better and better. It culminated, well, I wouldn't say culminated, but it came to a serious peak. You probably know this book better than I do, because that's in the first chapter where I'm talking about that. I think it was January of 1991. I'm forgetting, was it 1990 or 91? I think it was 91, during the height of the Gulf War and all that nonsense. Uh,
Yeah,
and
January 91. Yes,
yeah,
sir.
okay. And so that's when I began having experiences that you just can't make that stuff up. And then that kept growing until it just reached a crescendo, and I just had to just keep going. And magically, I was continually led to whatever it might be that comes next. Well, in 1992, and directly out of this January 1991 experience, directly out of that, I linked up with a group of like-minded people, and we would meet, an average of maybe once or twice a month, and we would just share that which was important to us, ranging from UFOs to the secret government to just straight spiritual stuff, to all of that stuff. Nothing was off limits for us, because there is a common thread that moves through all of it once you begin to link it all together.
Right.
And so then you might recall, I think it was in chapter 1 of the book, I print this copy of this letter in the book that I received from one of the members of this group, telling about a workshop that would be presented. That wasn't even a live workshop, it was a video workshop. And she goes into some of the details in that letter as to what this was to be about, that it was basically fundamental for our ascension process. And I knew exactly what she was talking about. And she was talking about this guy named Thoth, who is 52,000 years old and still alive. That didn't freak me out. I was well aware of that sort of phenomenon. And I just knew in an instant, I've got to be there. And that's where I first met Drunvalo Melchizedek, not in person, but on video. And that led me to get a set of those videos that we were watching. And I made a decision upon seeing it. Probably I made the decision about 5 minutes into the first video. And that decision was, I want to know what this guy knows. I want to be the master of what he's talking about. I made a similar decision 4 years earlier, which led me to master the technique that I call breath alchemy. And those are probably the two most important decisions, bar none, that I've ever made in my lifetime. Because had none of that happened, you and I would not be having this conversation today. And I certainly never would have been asked to write a book, which is also what happened. So kind of a long-winded answer. I almost forgot the question, but nonetheless, that's my response.
It's just that connection. And I see what you're saying too, because it is once you start going down that spiritual path, it's just like a domino effect, and you start seeing the synchronicity in everything. Like you said, the thread just weaves in it all. And it's sort of amazing. One thing about that too is once you become awake to it, if you deny it, if you kind of push against it, resist against it, bad things tend to happen to you.
Yeah, you can't you can't stay away from it. I mean, there really is no turning back. You can
Right.
pretend for a while that you're turning back, but it's not going to work. As you say, bad things are going to start to happen to you. Yeah,
Right.
right. The universe is going to let you know, you know, and it likes to, as best it can, give you a gentle nudge. But if that doesn't work, and if you keep turning your back and continue to resist, don't be too surprised if you get hit with a sledgehammer. And, it's called a wake-up call.
Yeah, it's called
Hey,
that for a
buddy.
reason.
Yeah, you can't turn away from this path. You gotta keep going. And then that combined with the enormously accelerated times that we are in, it's like, well, holy cow. I mean, you get an accelerated education in very short order here if you just stay on purpose. So fantastic, the times that
Uh,
we're in and the opportunities that are presenting themselves.
yeah, and I like that you brought that up because you have the one part in your book where you talk about affirmations and you talk about turning a negative situation in a positive situation. I'm
Yeah.
grateful for this because it gives me the opportunity to do this.
Yeah, yeah, and furthermore, I speak of, well, I do it much more succinctly and clearly in this edition than I did 25 years ago. But the basic idea is that there is a universal principle. There are tons of universal principles that if you learn to move with the universal principles, then you're moving with the flow of life. And one of the basic universal principles is whatever you resist will persist. You're only going to get more of what you don't want if you try and go like that to life. So there's an enormous practical benefit in learning to embrace life, in learning to allow yourself to be in a context of acceptance with what is, and what is in the moment. The moment is the only thing that's real anyway, too. But there's another very couple of very powerful principles that are driving that. And one being that the darkness, well, just put it to you this way and ask you what's on the surface going to sound like a stupid question. Just imagine, Scott, that you go into a room that's totally darkened. You can't see a thing, yet you know where the light switch is. Well, what happens to the darkness the moment you flip on the light switch?
Yeah, it dissipates.
The
It just
darkness cannot exist in the presence of light. And that is literally a universal principle, that the darkness gets transmuted in the presence of light, the darkness gets transmuted into itself, namely the light. And so contained within each and every one of us. And the affirmations principle is one way of doing that, but that's working more directly with the mind, transforming our subconscious belief systems on a conceptual level. But an even more direct and useful way of doing that is learning how to transmute the energy, learning how to take the darkness within you that you and I have been habitually conditioned to try and push away from ourselves. In so doing, we compartmentalize ourselves. So there's a part of us that we will accept, but there's all that stuff that we don't like and don't want to deal with. And so we are so thoroughly conditioned to want to feel good. And so we all want to feel good. And so in the absence of a conscious-minded technique, what we all resort to is suppression, meaning
Right.
you find a way to distance yourself from the corresponding unpleasant feelings in your body that feel yucky. Why? Because you're resisting them, because you're making them wrong. You're trying to push them away.
Right.
And so the body becomes a huge reservoir of stuck, suppressed energy that, just feels bad. And most people, therefore, are not in their bodies and very proficient at trying to suppress, to distance themselves away from these unpleasant feelings. And that's where compulsive behavior and addictive behavior stems from also. But the universal principle that says that in the presence of the light, the darkness transmutes into itself and becomes the light, then as we learn that if we can learn to make peace with the stuck energy rather than to resist it, rather than to fight it, we have contained within us its innate ability to transform the darkness within us into the light. That's the essence of the breath alchemy technique that I teach. And to me, that's what true transformation is. If you were to ask me, Bob, what's a definition of transformation? You could ask me right now, Scott, if you want to. You could say, Bob, what's transformation?
What's the definition of transformation?
Oh, thank you for asking.
Mr. Frissell.
Yes, thank you so much for asking. Well, it's transforming your ability to experience living. So the situations that you've been trying to change, i.e., you've been making them wrong and resisting them, those situations combined with situations that you've been putting up with, still making wrong and resisting, all that stuff clears up just in the process of life itself, because you've learned how to take the darkness within you and transmute it into the light, literally a transformation of energy. And so another way of looking at why that works, and that I go into great detail in the new book here, didn't talk about it all in the old book, because I don't think I fully understood it back then. But the whole idea being that what in the final analysis, what this universe is, waveform universe, is, I just said it, it's waveform. And waveform is vibration. And within vibration or waveform contains massive amounts, literally infinite amounts of intelligent energy, because it's all connected to source. It's all holographic, and any part of it is inseparable from the source. So it's all source energy. And so the body really is a holographic illusion. It's just a holographic projection of our consciousness. It appears to be real, but it's not. It's just light. It's just energy.
Right.
And
it's a reflection.
Yeah, we create it into reality. So it gives us, in third density here, something to play with, the illusion of something outside of ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the idea is that, like, for lack of a better term, God got bored with being all-knowing and alone, so it had to create these different it had to fractalize, like you said, and then that's when it comes into play. We don't know who we are. It becomes a game of figuring it out.
That's very well said. That's exactly right. Because there was a period when we were in full realization of our true nature, and we were just kind of like spoiled rich kids, just nothing was happening. And what we had to do was create a game that Alan Watts calls the game of hide and seek, where you hide yourself in yourself and pretend that you don't know who you are. And so you create
I love
duality.
Alan Watts. I love Alan Watts. For you to bring up Alan Watts, that makes my day.
Yeah, well, that's what I learned from the book, and Alan Watts, good stuff. So what I was I guess getting to, Scott, is that really the body is a holographic illusory projection of our true nature. And the bottom line, you know, is that the body is just energy. It's just waveform. It's just vibration containing in virtually infinite amounts of intelligent information, enough to build a body and keep it going, and all of that. So, and we live in a culture that has been trained to treat just the symptoms, i.e., you know, allopathic medicine and big pharma and all that stuff. But the body is just, again, a holographic projection of its base state. And its base state, if you go to the base state, what you're going to find is that the energy is all scrambled up. It's disharmonic. And so if you can learn to you integrate the energy in the base state or harmonize it, then the body will respond, because it's just a reflection of the base state, a holographic reflection. And so that's what promotes true healing. And
I think that's part of what helped Tool connect with your book so much, because I believe that they have an understanding of harmonics, frequencies, all these spiritual concepts that you talk about in your book, and metaphysics and the occult, and they use their music and sound waves as a sort of therapy or a reminder.
yeah, well, I get along very well with musicians. I'm a music freak myself, not a musician, but I just listen to music very intently, every single day, sometimes for many, many hours. And so this is an innate ability that we all have. And a great musician has got to have timing and rhythm and all of the rest of that, none of which comes from the mind. Yeah, you learn it conceptually, but you have to be able to let that go, so you can be in the flow with your music, so you can be in the moment with it. And when you do that, you are now connecting into your innate intelligence, your connection to all that is, your connection to source through your higher self. So musicians, especially the really good ones, whether they know it or not, in the moment of performing their music, are in not only totally in the moment, but in a totally enlightened state.
Oh, 100%. I
Yeah.
believe that musicians are like shamans
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Mhm. Yeah.
Um, so I think part of what I got into spirituality back in 2011. That's when I first started experimenting with psychedelics, things like that. I kind of got out of it for a while, and was not rewarded for it. And back in 2018, I started doing stand-up comedy, and I started getting back into psychedelics. I started studying metaphysics and the occult, the mystical things, spirituality, and it seemed like it was the comedy that helped me find that, kind of like how the bowling helps you want to better yourself. But the more and more that I studied and created, the more and more that I realized there was this super, just, you can't ignore it, this connection between creation and spirituality. And you say in your book that we're higher dimensional masters, spiritual beings having a human experience here to co-create heaven on earth, which is a Hermetic thing too. We're God's brothers. God stepped off the stage with creation 90% done and left the rest in our hands.
Yeah. Well, in a more literal sense, we are God. And if people don't like the term God, we are one with all that is.
Yeah,
It
the
uh,
all.
it's but it's just words, and you can never know that with your mind. I mean, you can know it as a concept, but it only exists in the present moment. And
Right.
so it's only in the present moment where, here again, the musician is in a state of total oneness, state of total unity, a state of total enlightenment. It's in the moment and only in the moment that it's available. So yeah.
And I feel it especially true because you alluded to it earlier that the moment is the only thing that's real. The past and the future are just concepts. This actual moment that you and I are experiencing right now is the only thing that I can really pinpoint as real, and even that I'm not so sure about.
Yeah. Well, Eckhart Tolle would love this. So.
Oh yeah, I like Eckhart Tolle. He has one quote that I really like. It's I lived with many Zen masters, most of them cats.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, uh, I currently live with two Zen masters, Alfie and Elsa. So I totally relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah, do you see the merit in that statement?
Yeah. Because animals are totally in the moment. They only know the present moment, and so they're not. Uh, they do have conditioning. They do have fears. Our kitties can get freaked out by something outside and just come running back in. So yes, they do have concerns, but still they basically live in the moment, and what you get from them is real. There's no
Right.
BS. There's no putting you on. There's no acts with them. It's very totally real and honest and accurate stuff. And so their love is unconditional, and it's the real thing,
It's
and it's a
pure.
direct reflection back to you of what you're putting out to them. It's wonderful. I mean, could you imagine living on a planet without animals?
No.
I
Yeah.
mean, what a blessing that we have them.
Oh yeah, my
Absolutely.
dog is my life. My dog is
Yeah,
my entire life. And
very good.
he's like a little Zen master for sure.
Well, they are great teachers. They're absolutely great teachers. And so my sense is that this is kind of like what Eckhart is driving at when he makes a statement like that. And obviously we both agree totally. So
I want to talk to you about a few more things, Mr. Frizzell,
call me
before we
Bob,
end
please.
Bob.
Nobody calls me Mister.
Sorry, it's that southern southern raised little boy still wants to call
Where were
everybody
you
Mister.
raised?
I was raised here in Fredericksburg.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I've lived here most of my life.
Uh-huh. Okay, great. Yeah.
How about you? You live in California now. Is
Yeah, I
that where
live in
you grew up?
California, but I was born in Minnesota and I
Okay.
grew up in North Dakota. And so moving to California was a major change to me. And it was many years ago, but I knew it was necessary. I knew it was absolutely necessary. I didn't necessarily know why, but I just it was an inner voice. It was an intuitive thing that just
Yeah.
says you got to do it. And that was before my spiritual initiations, but I trusted it and I went with it and really never looked back. And so here again, that was an essential move. I would say again, had I not made that move, you and I would not be having this conversation. And say that with a high degree of certainty. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how you can look back on your life and see the domino effect of, well, if this didn't happen, then that wouldn't happen. And the butterfly effect is very real.
Well, that's just it, Scott. I mean, there are no accidents, and the
Right.
only the only reason that we tend to see, that there are things that are happening that shouldn't be happening and all that is because we're so totally mind-based, and the mind is polarized. It
Right.
sees good and evil consciousness, meaning it's in a continual state of judgment. Oh, I like this. I don't like that, and that sort of thing. Well, then here again, the whole idea of God becoming so bored that she decides to create this game of forgetting who you are, then we become our minds. We become immersed in five sense reality, thinking that's all there is and that's what's so. And so, obviously, the greatest game in town is waking up and remembering who you are. And you are not your mind. You and I are not our minds. And therefore, we begin to step out of polarity and into unity. And in the context of unity, you can be looking at the same event and you're going to see, even though it's the same whatever going on, you're going to see it totally differently. You're going to see from the context of unity what appears from polarity to be two opposing agents. you know some force of darkness that's doing absolutely everything it can to keep you stuck in fear and limitation,
Right.
and the light within you doing everything it can to get you moving as quickly as possible. What we see is these opposing forces in polarity. But from unity, you begin to see that they're completely interconnected. They're just two differing aspects of the same thing, and they're actually working together. They're serving as timing agents. And so once you begin to see that, then you begin to see the perfection in all that's happening, no matter how good it may seem,
Right.
and no matter how bad it
Yeah.
may seem.
And when you truly have an awakening to that, it will bring you to tears. It'll make you cry and laugh. It'll send you into polarity, crying and laughing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, what you used to be horribly stuck in, you can break down in hilarious laughter when you once you've integrated into wholeness,
Right.
into unity.
And then when you
And
start seeing things that you before would label as bad or happening to you, you start to see as they're just happening. They just are. I choose to perceive them as good or bad or happening to me or just happening.
it's a function of polarity consciousness and being
Yeah.
in being stuck in you know being your mind. Sure, without question, what at the time was the worst thing that ever happened to me is obviously, without question, the best thing that ever happened to me. And what that was my bowling career came to a sudden halt when I injured my back, injured it severely in a bowling tournament. And like a dummy, never ever having an injured back before, I just tried to play through it, suck it up, and that didn't work very well. So I hurt myself really, really bad. And bowling, couldn't even pick up a bowling ball, let alone throw it down the lane. And so I had to find a way to heal myself uh, because I was not going to go to a doctor. I was not even going to let a doctor look at my back. I'd heard too many horror stories of surgery and people who spent the rest of their lives wishing they hadn't done that. Chiropractors helped initially, but diminishing returns very quickly set in. And that left me with only one option, finding a way to heal myself. And what I quickly discovered was that I had to reinvest myself into my spiritual nature and really take a deep dive into it. And that combined with my burning desire, I was not going to stop, no matter how long it took, no matter how many hardships, no matter how many setbacks. I was going to learn to use all of that to my advantage and not stop until I had found the way to heal my back. Well, I took what had transformed what seemed like an impossible situation. I mean, there's no way this could be healed, right? And I'm so proud to say that for many years now, I've been totally and completely healed to the point to like where it never ever occurred. And so that is the best thing that ever happened to me. Here again, had that not happened, that horrendous back injury, you and I would not be speaking at this
All
moment.
right.
So,
That's why it's important to remember moments like this when you're so happy and joyous. You're like, wow, everything led to this moment. That
yeah,
means all the things that you perceived as bad, too. So that means going forward, you got to remember.
yeah,
It is,
absolutely.
it's tough to stay conscious of those sometimes.
Well, sometimes it can temporarily take you over, but I would just take you back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and that's the ability to discover and then to master your innate ability to take your fears and limitations and whatever it is that's been stopping you and transform them into
Right,
very powerful and very purposeful life enhancing guidance systems. And
right,
so another way of saying that is that you are now being guided from within, from your higher self within. You are connected to source, connected to all that is. And when you're connected to source, you have access to infinite intelligence moving through you. And to be able to heal yourself from a crippling back injury, that's child's play in universal terms. The body is meant to be totally healthy. And it's just why is for many people, for most people, probably the body less than totally healthy? Well, it just here again goes back to polarity consciousness and all the judgments that we make. And anytime, here's the deal, to just, take a bit of more of a deep dive into this. Anytime you and I judge somebody or something, you get into an argument and it's usually at some point kind of like heated. Here's the body language of a heated argument, obviously. And so what it is that I'm right and you're wrong, and then you're really bad and terrible and awful for and like and all of that. And so there's the conceptual thing. Obviously I'm right and you're wrong. That's the concept. and it ties into our belief systems, subconsciously held, and all of that stuff. And we think we need to defend ourselves. And what is immediately and instantly created, there is always, for every thought you and I have, an instantly created pattern of energy, a sensation or a feeling in the body. And because of the judgment, the heated argument, I'm right and you're wrong, the corresponding pattern of energy or the feeling can only be an unpleasant feeling. And there's all this emotional stuff that we haven't integrated, dating back to early childhood and all of that. Well, who cares? It's in the moment right now. And so you've instantly created just a huge amount of yucky feeling, bad energy in your body. And because we're so conditioned to feel good, then immediately we go into suppression and we develop addictions and compulsive behavior to try and mask over the unpleasant feelings additionally. Well, if we don't learn how to consciously dealing with this reservoir of stuck energy, negative feeling, stuck energy in the body, it's going to start presenting itself in totally less than desirable ways. Not only do we get triggered and create many more incidences where an I'm right, you're wrong type thing, not realizing that it's just the same old repetitive nonsense, just the same old recording replaying itself. But also, this is the source of all illness and all disease, without exception. So how did I injure my back? All that unprocessed emotional stuff from childhood. It started ganging up on me in ways that let me know for certain that I'd better learn there's a conscious alternative or my life is not worth living.
So I'm really glad that you talked about that, because I want to use that to segue into the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about today. Obviously, when I scheduled this podcast, I did not know that the country would be erupted into total chaos and protests and riots. But I wanted to talk to you about like fear-based consciousness and how you got out of those, because you used to be, for lack of a better term, obsessed with these earth change prophecies.
Yeah, for sure.
I myself used to, when I first got into spirituality, it was because I was studying conspiracy theories. Well, ultimately, I got to the point with the conspiracy theories that was like, wait. If this was true, why would they let me have this knowledge? The truth is somewhere in the middle. All of this seems to be an attack on my consciousness. I'm involved in spiritual warfare. They're trying to keep me from reaching Christ consciousness.
Oh, without question, without question. The best way to control, and if you're the cabal, the Illuminati, the deep state, whatever the heck you want to call them, they've been in control of the planet, and they're very dark force entities. They've been in control for a long, long time, but their time is up right now, and they know that. Maybe you've heard of it. There is, we have, well, there's the technology that you and I are allowed to see, and then there's the real stuff that's been hidden behind the wraps for a long, long time. So far advanced from what we know, people who don't know would be amazed.
The stuff
there
that
is,
Bob Lazar talked about.
well, yeah, and many others too. But there is one technology called a Project Looking Glass, which allows you to see into the future. And so there, beginning in 2012, and 2012 was really a key year, there is only really one timeline. And the timeline is that planet Earth moves into the light. It goes through ascension. And the only question is how many people are going to make it through. Nothing to worry about. But the cabal knows this. They have Project Looking Glass too. And so they know that they are doomed and there's nothing they can do about it. But that doesn't mean they're going to go down quietly. It doesn't mean they're not going to go down without a fight. So this COVID-19 nonsense, it is a plandemic, a scandemic, and to keep you very much immersed in fear. Be afraid, be very afraid. Don't forget to wear your mask. Don't forget to social distance. And don't forget the second wave that's going to be coming this fall. Be very afraid. But that's losing its steam. Many states are opening up right now. And so what's the next? Well, hey, let's create a race war.
Yep,
Let's get a
race
few
state.
agent provocateurs out there, and we'll take what otherwise would be a peaceful protest, and we can very quickly turn it into a riot. Hey, I mean, it's, 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 it's age-old stuff. They've been
Yeah, like
using that.
Operation Northwoods and things like
Yeah,
that.
page out of their playbook that they've used many times before. But my point being is that here again, the darkness, it gets exposed to the light and it gets transmuted into itself. What they're doing is they're using up all of their chips. They are exposing themselves every time they play their hand like this big time stuff. 25, 30 years ago, talking about the secret government, people thought I was nuts. Now everybody knows who I'm talking about, at least in my circles,
Right.
and I write books about it.
Everyone in my circle knows who you're talking about too. And even if you don't necessarily believe in that concept, you know that it's a possibility.
But here's the thing, Scott. Every time they expose themselves, the darkness is coming up to the light to be exposed to the light. It only makes the light stronger.
Right.
And so the timeline is such that the ascension of the earth is going to happen. Everything that I said in my book about the ascension, it's come back to me. It's been confirmed to me in so many different ways from so many different sources that I never even knew existed at the time that I first wrote that book. The most likely timeline would be about 2029 to maybe 2030, although it could happen today, it could happen tomorrow. And the only question is how many people are going to go through. So you've heard about this thing called earth changes. And as you rightly point out, there was a point in my past where I was definitely, to say the least, concerned about earth changes because I didn't have the full picture. But the full picture is that there's this thing called karma. And enough people on the planet who are stuck in unconsciousness and stuck into fear mode and polarity consciousness, they create, just as we create in our own bodies as a result of trying to suppress these unpleasant feelings rather than learning how to consciously integrate them, to allow the energy to move again, to integrate the energy, trying to keep it suppressed. That starts coming out in very unpleasant ways, like arthritis, and it's more, well, that's pretty advanced right there, but it's the source of all illness and all disease, I will submit. But the same is true on a global scale. Mother Earth is alive. She is a conscious being. And if enough people try and keep their fears, are continually at the effect of them, then Mother Earth is going to be impacted too. And this is what earth changes are all about. There is a scenario. I don't know if we're going to make it or not, but I'm doing everything I can to promote it, where we just get it, and critical mass is created. And I talk about creating critical mass in my book, where if we get it, then we're going to go through ascension as though we're perhaps 1,000,000 years advanced from what we are right now. So there is that possibility. But don't worry, everybody's going to be okay, because the people who are ready, they will go through ascension into the fourth dimension, where life is many times better than even your greatest moments here in third density. Those who are not ready to go through ascension, they will be transported to another third dimensional planet where they will go through however many lifetimes they need to in order to learn their lessons, so they too eventually will go through ascension. The only people that need to worry about it are without mentioning names, but if I were, I would perhaps throw out names like Rockefeller, George Soros, and Rothschild, and stuff like that. The really bad people, the pedophiles, the ones who are killing and murdering little children and then drinking their blood and causing all the world wars and all the chaos that we see, these people are not going to be, they're not going to make it. They're going to be crispy critters. I'm sorry, it's karma. That's the way it goes.
It's almost like they're knowingly serving the demiurge just to have corporeal pleasure.
Satanic, Luciferian, all the way, and it's a conscious choice that they've made, and they will pay the price for it. And then when they do come back through reincarnation, they're going to have to go through many, many lifetimes where they will be the recipients of the torture and the chaos and the mayhem that they laid upon their victims in this
Yeah.
lifetime. It's
So,
it's
so,
really, in the final analysis, it's downright stupid.
so, Bob, what advice do you have for people like myself, people that are protesting, people that are on the other side of the baton and the boot, and even people who are police officers who don't have a full understanding of what's really going on in this world? What's a piece of advice that you can give everybody to walk away from?
Well,
If you were on Fox News right now, what would you say?
Fox News. Well, that's not going to happen. So, well, I mean, it's to give a simple answer. I'm not so sure I can, but just listen to this podcast that we've or read my book. I go through all of it right there. I mean, the greater truth, Scott, is that you and I are all one, whether we know it or not. And the opportunity is to wake up and to step into your true nature, to just let go of the false notion that we are our mind, and that there's good and evil consciousness, and
Right.
to I'm not talking about positive thinking either. I'm talking about integrating your way into unity. There's a
Right.
huge difference.
Step into your shadow.
Transmuting the energy, say it a little bit differently. There's parts of us, and definitely in the unaware state, parts of us that we consider to be good and acceptable, and we'll present that to ourselves and to others in the world. Yet there are parts of us that we are convinced are not contributing to our sense of well-being in any way, and we try and push that away from us. Unity is not positive thinking. It's expanding to include the darkness within, and doing it in a way that you've integrated, that you've transmuted that energy, that dark energy, that chaotic energy, into light. And so now you've expanded to include all parts of yourself, and you're doing it in a unified way. And that is not positive thinking. There's a huge difference, huge difference.
That's important. That's important to clarify, I think.
Fundamentally, yeah.
I would love to have you on again, Bob, to talk more about words. Words are magic and perception. You being a fan of Alan Watts, I think it's really important to talk about etymology and the origin of words. That's something he talks about a lot in his lectures. How can people find your workshops and your books?
Well, first of all, Scott, thank you very much for inviting me this time, and I'll come back anytime you want.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming and doing this.
Come back tomorrow if you want.
Okay.
How do people get a hold of me? Well, just go to my website, bobfrissel.com. And I guess you need to know how to spell my name. So I don't know. Can you see this, my name? How to spell it?
You got to hold it up higher.
How are we doing here?
Boom. That's perfect. Bob Frissell.
Yeah, so it's spelled Frissell, 2 S's and 2 L's. Go to bobfrissel.com and enjoy the show.
Great. I say enjoy the trip. That's what I say. Maybe that's something else we could talk about on the next podcast is psychedelic experiences.
We could.
Okay, Bob, you have a great night, sir. You stay safe out there.
Well,
and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you very much. And you have a great evening yourself.
Also, before you go, I would recommend to you this gentleman, Andrew Weiss, Dr. Andrew Weiss, Self-Healing. He was on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he talked a lot about the placebo effect and how you can heal yourself with your mind. But man, if you and that guy compared and contrasted notes, maybe you could make a difference in the world.
Well, maybe so. And I've often thought, many times, in fact, I've thought how much fun it would be to get together with Eckhart Tolle for an afternoon. I would give him a breath alchemy session, because that's as great as his work is, that's his missing link.
That's amazing. I like to see that happen.
That was a stupid thing to say. I'm sorry, Eckhart. I love you.
I hope he's listening.
I totally honor you and respect your work, Eckhart. And there's this one thing I would like to show you.
Yeah, right. We have a lot to learn from each other. I think that's important. None of us has all the answers.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Without Drinvalo, you wouldn't be where you are, and without you, I wouldn't be where I am.
Oh, I learned so much from Drinvalo, and other great teachers in my
Yeah.
life.
We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, very grateful for every moment. Absolutely.
I'm very grateful for this podcast. Bob, you have a wonderful night, sir.
Oh, you too.
And I'll send you these links once everything's up.
That's great. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you, bud. Bye.